A warm welcome to all the students for the subject Object Oriented Programming using Java for lecture number 1. In this introductory lecture, we are going to see the history behind developing this language, and we are going to see what are the different features possessed by Java. So let us begin. In the year 1991, Sun Microsystems USA, they decided to design a software for consumer electronics, mainly for remote sensing. So basically they wanted to come up with a device, which could control a number of consumer electronics, for example microwave oven or washing machines and so on, through a remote sensing device like a remote control. And to do that, they comprised a team, and that was called as Green Project Team. James Gosling, Patrick Norton and Mike Sheridan, they constituted this Green Project Team. James Gosling was the in charge of programming. So he found out that C and C++, which were the predominant languages during that time, they were not fruitful in these cases, as these languages were compiler based and platform dependent languages, which simply means that when you create a C program or C++ program on one computer, the C compiler converts that .c program into an object file. When you run the program, what is created is the exe file, executable file. This exe file, it contains the machine instructions pertaining to the native processor on which the program has been designed. Suppose the processor on which the program has been designed happens to be a Pentium processor, then the machine code that is generated in the executable is with respect to the instruction set that is defined by the manufacturer of Pentium processor. Now there is a hurdle. If this .exe file is then copied and you try to run it on another system with a different configuration of the processor, for example Celeron processor, this exe file, which is now executing on the Pentium processor machine, will not be able to run on Celeron processor machine. And that is just because the machine instructions which are there in the exe file, those machine instructions are different from the instruction set that is defined for the Celeron processor. And as a result, C and C++, they have a serious portability issue. They are compiler based platform dependent languages. And here the Green Project Team wanted to design a software that could work for multiple different electronic devices. Each electronic devices, they might have a different microprocessor and they might have a different set of instructions. So using C and C++ was the main hurdle. Gosling, he set out to design a new programming language for consumer electronics. So basically he wanted to design a new programming language which will be platform independent. That means it can run, the same program can run on various configuration machines with various operating systems. So he set out to design a new programming language. Now when we work with C and C++ program, as I have said, these programs which are compiled on one operating system or one machine, they won't work on another machine or another operating system. So Gosling starts working on a language which would have the same syntax as C and C++. Why? Because during that time it was known, and even today C and C++ happens to be one of the most powerful languages of all times. The syntax of C and C++ at that time, somewhere in 90s, it was so popular that the programmers were used to writing and coding in C, C++. So Gosling wanted to keep the same syntax, but he wanted to eliminate some concepts which were creating problems with respect to the reliability of the software. So the difficult concepts in those C, C++, he wanted to eliminate in his new language. So once the language was designed, Gosling he named it as Oak. Okay, there is nothing specific about this name. Okay, it was said that outside his office, okay, just through his window, he could see a oak tree. There stand a oak tree, and just by looking at that, it simply struck that let me name the programming language as Oak. But then this name had to be changed. That we'll see later. In 92, the Team Green project, using this Oak language, they made a very strong demonstration, okay, of an application. This application was able to control the least of home appliances using a handheld device with a tiny touch screen. In the next year, 1993, what happened was World Wide Web. It appeared on internet, and when this www appeared on internet, it basically transformed the text-based internet to graphic-rich environment using the Java technology. Okay, now for that, the Green project team, okay, once www appeared on the internet, the Green project team, they came out with an idea of designing an applet, Java applet you can say, designing an applet that could run on all the computers that are connected to internet. Okay, now what is this applet? Applet is a small snippet of code. Okay, so you have a server and this applet will reside on the server. So the HTML file on the server that is to be sent to the client, it will have one tag called as applet tag, and applet will be residing on the server. Now when client requests for a page, for an application, this HTML document along with its applet is sent to the client. So basically from the remote server, the applet gets downloaded on the client machine and it runs on the client machine. Okay, so this was basically the idea that Green project team proposed. In the next year, 94, the Green project team, based on that same idea, they developed the first Java enabled web browser in the world, and they named it as Hot Java to locate the applets on internet. Now you see the name that you can see here is Hot Java, but then how that Java term came? So something happened between 93 and 94. Okay, we are going to see that, right? Till 93 and 94, till www appeared on the internet. Okay, this Oak language was used internally in the Sun Microsystems. But as the team proposed in 94, in 93, that they are going to come up with the idea of applet. Okay, and as they were able to come up with a web browser just during that time, the issue with the name of the Oak language, it appeared. They came to know that there is another product with the same name called as Oak. So they had to rename the product, and in 95, okay, they named that same language with a new name that is called as Java. Okay, now there is one small story. Again, see, first of all, Gosling was blank. He just named it as Oak, and now that the name was removed, what next? Okay, now this Green project team, the people from the Green project team, they were very fond of coffee. During the development of the projects, they drank a lot of coffee and they enjoyed good quality coffee. Now it was known in US that a very good quality coffee beans, they come from the place, or they are imported from a place called as Java Islands. So they being very fond of coffee, they named the language as Java. Okay, and the symbol became the steaming hot coffee cup. Now once the web browser Hot Java, okay, it came out, people started using it. Already existing companies like Netscape Communication, who were the leaders in web browsers during that time, they had to do only one thing, that is they had to announce their support to Java. And subsequently Microsoft with their Internet Explorer, okay, much in demand, they also announced their support to Java, because Java enabled the simple text-based internet to turn into a graphic-rich environment where you could see the animations and that sort of things. In the next year, 1996, Java announces itself the leader in internet programming and general purpose object oriented programming language. It is just because there was no other programming language that could hold the hand of Java when it came to internet programming. Also, Java became so popular that they came up with a flavor of general purpose object oriented programming language to design the desktop applications. Sun Microsystem, for that matter, released Java Development Kit 1.0, which is called as JDK 1.0 in the same year. Next year, JDK, the next version of it, Java Development Kit 1.1 was released. In 98, Java 2 with version 1.2 of SDK was released. Please note that from 1.2 version onwards, Java was called as Java 2, meaning Java version 1.2. In 99, Sun releases Java 2 platforms. Two major platforms were released. One is called as J2SE, that is Java 2, that is Java 1.2 Standard Edition, okay, and Java 1.2 or Java 2 Enterprise Edition. Enterprise Edition was basically used, it contained tools for designing enterprise solutions for the industry. In 2000, Java 2 SE, that is Java 2 Standard Edition SDK 1.3 was released. In 2002, SDK 1.4 was released. In 2004, J2SE with JDK 5.0 was released. Now, it's very important to note that after version 1.4, there should be 1.5 version, but Java just changed the name of the version from 1.5 and they just said it as 5.0. In the year 2010, Oracle Inc., which is just another big name in software companies, Oracle, known for its powerful database, data warehouse, Oracle takes over Sun Microsystem, so Java became the property of Oracle. So from 2010 onwards, Java is no longer associated with Sun Microsystems but with Oracle Inc. Now in 2006, after Java 5.0 was released, in 2006 they came up with the next version, that is Java SE6. Please note that actually 6.0 should have been the name, but they just removed 0.0 from the version, so it was called as Java SE6 and not Java SE 6.0. Then in 2011, Java 11 was released after Java 7, after Java 8, 9 and 10 being released in between years. Today we have the version Java 12. Let us go and find out what are the features of Java. The first feature is that the Java is compiled and interpreted. Java is platform independent and portable. It is fully object oriented. It is robust and secure. Java is distributed. It is simple, small and familiar. Java is multi-threaded and interactive. It has high performance. Java is dynamic and extensible. There is a lot of ease of development while working with Java. Java is scalable and it has a very high performance. Java can be used for monitoring and for manageability, and Java has a very good support of desktop client. Now let us see each of these features in details. Java is a compiled and interpreted language. Okay, now you must have realized, coming from the C++ background, okay, you must have realized that C as well as C++, they are called as compiler based language. Compiler is a tool that converts the source code into the machine code, the code that is understood with the machine, or high level language is converted to a machine language. Now C and C++, they are compiler based languages, but Java is a two-stage system. Just because the designers of Java wanted it to be portable, okay, so that it can be, the same code should be able to run on different platforms, unlike C++, they came up with a two-stage system. Now let us see what is this two-stage system. So they said that a Java programming language would work in two levels, two stages. First level, there would be a Java compiler, and Java C is the compiler that is used in Java. and in the second stage we would interpret that particular intermediate code into the machine code. So there was an interpreter also. The name of the interpreter used in Java is Java. Compiler name is JavaC and the interpreter name is Java. Now let's see how this happens. Let's say I am writing a simple program in Java. Let us name it as sample.java. Note that like C program has extension .c, like C++ program has extension .cpp, any Java program has extension .java. So let's say we have designed a simple program sample.java. Then this program, the high level program that you have designed, okay, or you have written, it is given to the compiler, that is JavaC compiler. Okay, so what JavaC compiler does? JavaC compiler converts the source code into something called as a bytecode. Okay, and the extension of this bytecode file is .class. Now let me talk about this bytecode. See, now with C and C++, the major issue was what? Once the code is compiled, okay, code has to run on the same system with the same configuration on which it is compiled. This was a problem with your C and C++, right? Now what Java programmers did is they came up with a platform neutral set of instructions. That means no matter on which platform you are working, and when I say platform, it is which processor, which operating system, what system resources, all this comprises of platform. So Java team, they came up with concept of something called as bytecode. Bytecode, as the name suggests, it is basically these are set of instructions. Nearly there are some 200 set of instructions that Java team had designed. So what they said is any program that is written in Java can be converted into the instruction set called as bytecode that is specifically designed by this Java team. And this bytecode is platform neutral. That means this bytecode is common no matter what configuration of the computer that you are using, what processor, what OS, how many bits, irrespective of any configuration, all PCs will have the same bytecode instructions when a compiler, JavaC compiler will execute a Java file on that particular system, right? So if I am working on a Pentium PC, if my program is executed by the Java compiler on Pentium PC, the bytecode generated will be same as that generated when I work on another processor, say Celeron processor PC. So bytecode instruction will be same. Okay. So what basically Java programmers did is they came up with set of instructions. Okay, nearly 200 set of instructions. Now the name bytecode comes because each instruction's length or size was 1 byte. Likewise, there was around 200 set of instructions which they had designed. Okay, so what they said, any code that is written in Java, JavaC compiler converted that code into a bytecode format. Okay, now so the very first thing what happens is this .java file that you have written, high level language, JavaC compiler converts it into a bytecode. Please again remember, bytecode is a platform neutral. No matter on which PC the program is compiled, the bytecode will remain the same on all the different PCs of all different architectures and the hardware processor, right? Now extension of this bytecode is .class. So the file name is sample.java, JavaC compiler converts this file into a bytecode file that is sample.class. Simple. So this is how the standardization is ensured. That means no matter what PC you use, the bytecode will be same. But the second question comes now. Okay, although each PCs they have the same intermediate bytecode, but the machine instruction that each PC will understand will be different based on the instruction set that are designed for that particular processor. Which means if I am working on a Pentium processor will have a different machine set of instructions designed by their creators. Spark processor will have a different machine instruction set for the Spark processor. So instruction sets will be different, right? So in Java, okay, they came up with something called as a Java virtual machine. Now, as the name suggests, Java virtual machine or JVM, it stands for a program. It is not an actual computer. It's a virtual machine. It's a small program that resides in the computer's memory. Okay. Now, from where this JVM comes? See, whenever you want to work with Java, the very first thing what you will do is you will go to Oracle's website and you will have to download JDK, that is Java Development Kit, JDK. That's the first thing that you will have to do. You will have to download it and install it on your PC. Now, on that website you will see there are different flavors of JDK that are present. Suppose I want to download JDK, say JDK 1.8. Example, I want to download JDK 1.8. Now you will see that same JDK 1.8 will be present for different flavors. For example, you will have one version for Windows 7 32-bit. You will have another version for Windows XP 64-bit. Example, you will have another version for Windows 10 64-bit. Another version for Linux, right? Again 64 and 32 bits. These are nothing but instruction sets for that particular machine. So whenever you are going to install Java, you will have to first find out what is the configuration of your PC. Okay, your operating system is what, and whether the instruction set is 64-bit or 32-bit. And based on that, correspondingly, that particular flavored version you will download on your system. Right? Now, whenever this JDK is downloaded, this Java Development Kit, within it, it has Java compiler, that is Javac, and it also has Java interpreter, that is called as Java, and along with many other files which at this moment I will not tell you. Okay. Now, as I told you, may it be any flavor of JDK 1.8, the Javac compiler will be same. That means on any of these machines, whatever Java program you write, the bytecode will appear same. But each of this flavor will have a native JVM version. That means if I have downloaded JDK for say Linux machine of 64-bit, the Java virtual machine that has been downloaded on your system and installed on your system will be JVM that supports the native configuration, that is 64 bits and the Linux operating system. Right? Similarly, suppose I am using a Spark processor and I am working, example, I am using a Spark processor of 64-bit for example, and I am using something like say Windows XP for example, then I must have downloaded the version Windows XP 64-bit. So the JVM that is being downloaded along with JDK will be native to your configuration. That JVM will be for 64-bit and it will be for the operating system that you wanted, that you desired. Right? So let us proceed. So this first stage is a compilation stage, wherein the sample.java program is compiled into a bytecode which is platform neutral. Now let's say I am using a Pentium processor. That means I have downloaded the Java 1.8 flavor for Pentium processor of particular bits, and say I am using a particular operating system. So when I download it and install, I will have JVM, okay, that will understand my configuration. So you will have Java virtual machine for Pentium processor for example. So now what Java virtual machine does? Java virtual machine program, it will read the bytecode. The first thing is this Java virtual machine will read the bytecode. Okay. Then within this JVM environment there is Java interpreter. Now this Java interpreter also will be native for the Pentium processor. Okay. So you will have Java interpreter for Pentium processor. What Java interpreter will do? Java interpreter will now interpret this particular bytecode instruction into the machine code for Pentium machine, right? And that is how a sample.java program that is written on a particular computer of different configuration can now run correctly on a machine with Pentium processor. Suppose you have another machine with Celeron processor, then remember when you had downloaded the software JDK 1.8, you must have downloaded it for say 32-bit processor is there, and say operating system is Linux, you must have downloaded it for 32-bit and the Linux version. So the JVM that you must have downloaded will be the JVM for the Celeron processor and for the operating system Linux. Okay, so now for the second PC, the program is written somewhere else. The same program now I am trying to execute on Celeron processor. So JVM will be native to the Celeron processor. That means JVM will understand the instruction set. It will be able to convert the instruction into the instruction set known to the Celeron processor only. Again, JVM for Celeron will access this bytecode, and the Java interpreter in this case will be Java interpreter for Celeron. It will interpret this bytecode into the machine code that is understood by the Celeron machine. So you see, the program may be written on any machine, but it can be run on different platforms, either on a Pentium platform, or it can be run on Celeron platform, or suppose Java Spark processor, if it is there, that also will have its own JVM, its own interpreter, and it will generate machine code for the Spark machine. So this is how two-stage system in Java works. In the first stage, compilation happens. Compilation is platform neutral, and in the second stage, interpreter is used, JVM, based on the configuration of the local machine. That particular JVM which is installed on that machine, it will read the neutral bytecode and it will interpret it according to the configuration of that particular PC. So that's how you can say that Java is platform independent, and also it is called as portable. It is called as platform independent because not depending on any operating system or not depending on any hardware, the same Java program can run everywhere. And Java is called as portable because if you write a Java program and if you just copy paste it on this particular processor or this particular PC, it will execute. Okay, and whatever output it gives, the same output it is also going to give it on any other configuration system. So no matter what configuration system it is, the output will remain the same, and that is called as portability. Okay, so the first feature of Java is compiled and interpreted programming language. The second feature of Java, which I have already discussed, Java is a platform independent language and portable. I have already spoken about it. So portable means Java programs can be easily moved from one computer system to another, anywhere and anytime. We have just seen it. Change in operating system or processors or hardware, it will not affect the Java program's output. Okay, so suppose I had first written a program while using a Windows XP operating system, then I copied it somewhere and then I changed the operating system of my PC. Okay, now when I again paste that same program, okay, I will be able to run the same program. Of course, Java will have to be installed again, JDK, for that particular operating system. I will be able to run the same program which earlier worked for Windows XP machine. Now it will work for Windows 8 or Windows 10 machine also without any problem. Okay, so that is called as platform independent, irrespective of processor, OS or hardware. It will not affect the Java program. This is called as platform independence. And Java is popular for internet programming. It is due to the applets. Now, as I've already mentioned, what is applet? Applet is basically a code that resides on the web server. Okay, when a client requests for that particular program, this applet code is downloaded on the client machine through the web browser, and this program can then run on the client machine. So again, see, because of this platform independence and portability, no matter this applet may have designed on any configuration PC, once it gets downloaded on the native machine or on the client, according to the configuration of that client, it will run without any problem. It will be able to give the output, right? We can download applet from the remote computer to our computer and execute it locally. And that's why Java is the best suited language for internet programming. Because what is internet? Internet has different, it is basically network of all possible networks in the world. So you just imagine there will be different computers of different configurations, different processors, operating systems, all will be able to run the same Java code that comes from the web server. Okay, and because of this platform independence and portability, it can run. Java ensures portability in two ways. One, Java generates bytecode instructions that can be implemented on any machine. I have just told you Java instructions, the bytecode instructions which are compiled by JavaC compiler, they are platform neutral. So that is one way how portability can be ensured. And second, the size of primitive data types are machine independent in Java. If you have noted, when you learned C++, okay, it was said that for the old machines, 16-bit machines, the integer, it takes 2 bytes. But for the higher bit machines, integer takes 4 bytes. So int was taking either 2 bytes, int data type was taking either 2 bytes for old machines, and it was taking 4 bytes for the new machines. Now this thing does not happen in Java. In Java, all the primitive data types, their space, the memory allocated is sufficient so that you can say that they are machine independent. Irrespective of whichever configuration and whichever bits, the data types will remain the same. Third very important feature is that Java is an object-oriented language. Now we have already come from the background of C++. Is C++ object-oriented? Yes, but it is not fully object-oriented. Although C++ is an extension of C, although C++ supports object orientation, but you cannot say that C++ is object oriented fully, because without the use of classes and objects, you can write and execute C++ programs, right? If it was object oriented, then without the help of classes and objects, you should not have been able to write any programs, right? Whereas in Java, almost everything is an object, unlike in C++. So you can't write a Java program without class declaration. So even if you want to write a simple hello world program, you need to write a class and you need to create an object of that class. Otherwise, you will not be able to run the program. That's why I say that Java is a fully object-oriented programming language. Java is robust and Java is secure. Robust. Why robust? Because Java has many safeguards, like a strict compile time and runtime checking for data types. Java has automatic garbage collection. Remember, in C++, whenever you create a constructor, you have to write a destructor, right? So when you write a destructor, then what the compiler will do, when it finds out that a particular object is no longer in use, it will destroy it. But in Java, you don't have to write a destructor. This garbage collection, that means freeing off the unutilized memory, or removing all the unused objects which are no longer required. This happens in a periodic fashion, okay, and this is called as automatic garbage collection. Okay. Third, powerful exception handling mechanism is there in Java, which was not there in C++. It was not so powerful. So this powerful mechanism, it helps to capture serious errors, and it helps to eliminate the risk of crashing the system. Okay. So these three are the main features which ensures that the code that you write is reliable. Okay. Also, Java is secure. Why secure? Because in Java, the pointers concept, which was there in C and C++, is not present. So since pointers are absent, it ensures that program cannot gain access to memory locations without proper authorization. You must have noted that in C and C++, okay, whenever you use pointers with an array, just initialize the pointer to the beginning of the array, and in iteration just go on incrementing the pointer. Even after reaching the bound of the array, okay, if you still increment the pointer, it would have incremented one more time and it would have accessed the data from a memory which is outside the bound of array. This is called as memory leakage. Okay, this is one of the problems, because of which all this security problems come into picture, viruses and so many things. So because of this, the Goslings, he thought that yes, I would not allow the pointers to be used by the end users. But see, pointers are very strong concept. When you remove pointers from Java, it will also affect its effectiveness, but it is not so. There are some other things which are written in the Java language, okay, which will take care of this pointer thing, but user will not be able to access the pointers. There are no pointers in Java. Java ensures that there are no viruses communicated with an applet. Please note that, as I have said, what is bytecode? Bytecode, so any program can be converted into bytecode. Bytecode is nothing but it is the format that is specified by the Java developers instruction set. So any Java code can be converted into the instruction set that is permissible by the Java developers. That's called as a bytecode. Now suppose somebody inserts a virus or some code which is malicious. Okay, once JavaC compiler converts it into a bytecode, Java Virtual Machine JVM, when it reads the bytecode, it will find out, it will understand that this particular instruction is malicious. Okay, it's malignant, maybe the syntax or something like that. It will find out, and as a result, if it finds out, if JVM finds out that a particular code is not secure, or if a particular code is malicious, JVM will fail to execute, and as a result, since the JVM fails to execute, the instructions will not be given to the machine, and since instruction won't be given to the machine, the code won't run. So if at all there is any virus present in the program that is being compiled or that is being read by the JVM, okay, the program will not run at all. So the virus will not be effective. Okay, the same thing with the applets. So with all this, Java happens to be the most robust and the most secure programming language. Java is distributed. Java apps can open and access remote objects on internet as easily as you do it on the local system. Programmers at multiple remote locations, they can collaborate together and work together on a single project. So these are the features which Java has, because of which we say that Java is a distributed language, because you can work in Java in a distributed manner from different PCs, from remote places you can work on a single project. Sixth, Java is simple, small and familiar. Okay. Now, redundant and unreliable features of C and C++ are eliminated from Java. Okay, keeping the syntax almost same at C and C++. So you must have realized that pointers which are very difficult, or for that matter in C++ we have something called as multiple inheritance, which is also problematic, because you have using something called as virtual base class in C++ to tackle this problem. Okay, it creates ambiguity otherwise. So all this problematic or unreliable features of C, C++. Also there is something called as type modifiers. Okay, type modifiers are there. There are so many features. Go to statement. All these which are unreliable or sometimes they are redundant, they are removed from Java. Okay, the syntax is kept as same, and that's why Java happens to be a simple. It is smaller and yet it is familiar, because the syntax is almost same as C++ programming. Okay, Java doesn't support what? Pointers, preprocessor statements and header files, because in C++ there are something called as macro viruses that comes into picture through the header files. Okay, only when the header files are executed in the execution phase, only then the system realizes. By that time it is too late, and your program will not be suspicious and it will run. So virus will run, right? Similarly, go to statements are also removed. Multiple inheritance is removed, and operator overloading concept in C++ is also removed from Java, making it simpler, smaller and yet familiar. Java is multi-threaded and interactive. Okay, now Java is multi-threaded. Okay, what is the meaning of multi-threading? Java can handle multiple tasks simultaneously. That's basically something called as multi-threading. Okay, there is no need to wait for an application to finish one task before beginning another, because the execution will be carried out parallelly. Different threads will be parallelly run to execute a particular code. Java is interactive. As Java runtime, it has tools that support multi-process synchronization and construct smoothly running interactive systems. Java has a high performance. It is just because Java performance is impressive for an interpreted language mainly due to the use of intermediate byte code. Java speed, if you see, it can be comparable with C and C++. Java architecture is so designed to reduce the overhead during the runtime. Incorporation of multi-threading enhances overall execution speed of Java program. Java is dynamic and extensible. Java is dynamic. We say dynamic because Java can dynamically link new class libraries, objects and methods. Java can determine the type of a class through a query, making it possible to dynamically link or abort a program depending on the response. Java is extensible because, for your information, Java program along with its own syntax, many times there are something called as native methods. There are some C and C++ functions which Java program can support. That means these functions can be used with the Java program. Okay, so that's why we say that functions written in other languages can be supported by Java. That's why Java is extensible. Ease of development. Now from Java standard edition 5 onwards, there are support concepts such as generics, enhanced for loop, there is something called as auto boxing, there is type safe enumeration. So all this we are going to see as we proceed further. Okay, and these concepts, they ensure ease of development for the user. Also, use of these concepts, they reduce the work of programmer by shifting the responsibility of creating the reusable code to the compiler. Resulting code is free from bugs, as errors made by compilers, they are very less compared to those made by programmers. Java has high scalability and very high performance. Java 5 onwards ensures increase in scalability and performance by improving the startup time and reducing the amount of memory in Java 2 runtime environment. Java monitoring and manageability capability is very good. Java API like JVM monitoring management API, Sun management platform, Java management extension. So these are different APIs that are there in Java. They help monitor and manage Java applications. Let us see how Java differs from C. Now following C core concepts have been eliminated or skipped from Java. First, there was something called as size of operator and type def keywords in C, which are removed from Java. Structures and union concept is removed from Java. Then type modifiers like auto, extern, registered, sign, unsigned, which are very popular in C, they are removed from Java. Then explicit pointer type, okay, is removed from Java. Then preprocessor statements, remember, like hash define, include, hash if def, all these preprocessor statements are also removed from Java. Now what are the addition to this C concepts? Functions with no argument. Suppose there was a function in C which does not receive any argument. In C, we would write that function with a void keyword inside the parenthesis. But in Java, you should not write void keyword, rather you should keep the parenthesis empty. This is new. And also Java adds a new operator called as instance of, and so on. There are many operators that we are going to see. They are the additions to C concepts. Finally, we are going to see how Java differs from C++. Now following core concepts of, C++ have been removed or skipped from Java. First one is operator overloading, because we have seen that operator overloading can do so many malicious things. For example, plus can be overloaded to do subtraction, and there are so many other things. Okay, so that that questions the reliability, and as a result Java developers have removed operating overloading concept. Template classes have been removed. Multiple inheritance have been removed, because you know that there was ambiguity and we had an option of virtual base class. Okay, so what Java people did was they removed this multiple inheritance concept. Now, removing multiple inheritance concept does not mean that Java cannot handle multiple inheritance. There is altogether a different concept which are better than multiple inheritance that we are going to see later. Interfaces. Okay. Then use of global variables. Now, global variables can freely move around the system. Okay, they don't have security. So in C++, global variables were allowed, but Java does not allow global variables. Any variable, it has to be declared within the class. Outside the class, you cannot define any variables in Java. Pointers, again, it was difficult for us to learn. Also, there were problems that were faced with respect to reliability. So Java developers, they have removed pointers from Java. Header files, okay, because of macro viruses and so on, all the header files, preprocessors, they have been removed. And finally, destructors in C++, they have been replaced by a function called as finalize function. So with this, I end today's lecture. Thank you.